Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Many thanks for staying tuned to Early Exchange. Now let's turn to India and then we'll get to other parts of the world from India. So it is reported that India has outpaced major economies of the world in intangible investments. Ever heard of that before, intangible investments? Well, we'll be talking about that this morning on the show. Joining me live in the studio is a public affairs analyst and the policy expert, Sam Orovwuje. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Blessing. Good to be here.
Great to have you here on a Monday morning.
Thank you very much indeed. My pleasure.
All right, let's get to India now. Like I said, from there we'll touch other parts of the world. It's news that India has outpaced major economies of the world in growth of intangible investments. Yes, we know that India is an emerging economy, but to have outpaced major economies of the world, talking about countries like even the US, in terms of intangible investment, that seemed to be a great feat to achieve. Do you agree?
Well, yes, indeed. When you talk about intangible investment, you're talking about intellectual property. India is remarkable when you talk about data, artificial intelligence, some of the essential element that has to do with intellectual property. They are big with data and all other elements, particularly in terms of the IT skills, science, technology, and mathematics education that is so entrenched in India. So if you look at some of the well-celebrated global organizations, about 90% of those global organizations are headed by India. So when you talk about data in particular, IT skills, they are number one. And they have overtaken so many countries of the world because they have invested so much in what you call intangible assets or what you call intellectual property. And the World International Property Organization just did a research, and they found out that India had outsmarted so many advanced economies in terms of intellectual property development and what they export in terms of data mining and other elements within the intellectual property ecosystem. So that's what they mean by intangible.
Now, the reason this is a surprise to a lot of countries is that given India's development and given the size and state of their economy, they were not actually expected to have outpaced major economies. Now, the report also has it that from 2011 to 2020, India has had tremendous growth in terms of intangible investments. Do you find this intentional that India seemed to focus on this aspect?
I think it's intentional. When you have a massive investment in science, technology, and possibly mathematics, what they call the STEM. Over the years, India is known in terms of science development. To that extent, that has helped in terms of the level of intellectual property that has been developed from that element. And India has been in the forefront exporting IT skills in particular to the global north and the global south. In that regard, therefore, we can say with all certainty that India was intentional in terms of science, technology, in the way they have improved in terms of artificial intelligence, data, and all other elements within that space.
Now, some of the major economies that India is said to have outpaced are the US, UK, Germany, and even France. And this highlights the significant value creation of Indian companies in this aspect, providing such services. Is that to say that some of the major economies have actually slowed in the growth for India to have caught up with them and even overtaken them?
No, I don't think it's slow necessarily in terms of growth. Like we just spoke to earlier, when there's a deliberate investment, particularly in terms of science education, which is a major driver of development, then India is bound to reap from that. So not necessarily they are slow, but India over the years has had a deliberate policy in terms of the investment they make in education, particularly ICT. In that regard, therefore, that has brought about a quantum leap in terms of how India has fared in terms of intangible investment vis-a-vis other developed economy.
Now let's take a deeper look at what intangible investment would be. You laid the background at the start of the conversation. Can we look deeper into it and how countries can actually copy India's intentionality in this regard?
Well, I think the bedrock of Indian success in terms of intellectual property, like we mentioned earlier, is built on solid education, solid infrastructure, particularly ICT. So once you make a massive investment in terms of education and you're intentional, like you mentioned earlier, then the gains in terms of the quantum leap that you're going to derive from that will be so remarkable that some people will want to copy that development. So therefore, what we may say, particularly for the global south, is that there's a need for massive investment in ICT so that the skills that are derivable from that can be exported, just like the way India is exporting intellectual property to the rest of the world.
So intangible investments are non-physical investments, but they have quite great economic value. So India has done well in many of them, notably intellectual property. Looking at that, it suggests that India has innovated a lot of maybe technology or even services, that products and services that are in use, because you would need to have that for you to own the intellectual property right to some of these things. If we look at Africa, for instance, where there is use of different technology, different products that have been created elsewhere, and they can now be used to further create other things. What can Africa learn in this aspect? Aside from schools having education that has to do with STEM, science, technology, mathematics, engineering, what can we learn in terms of intellectual property? There seems to be a focus on the entertainment industry when we talk about intellectual property in Africa. Is there a disconnect?
No, I don't think there's a disconnect. First, let's try to underscore the discussion, then we can move into the relationship between arts and science. So India, over the years, has invested so much on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. What that has brought to bear in India is that massive investment in terms of creativity, in terms of innovation, they have continually made a lot of investment, and these investments are exported elsewhere, even to the United States of America, where most of the IT companies across the globe are headed by Indians. So in that regard, therefore, Africa must make massive investment in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Furthermore, what they need to do is to equally create innovation centers, a kind of hubs, or where technology can be incubated. And that investment must be sustained over a period of time if we want to benchmark India's success. And if you look at the literature, you see that even the global north will take a long while to meet up with India in terms of the remarkable intellectual property that they export to the world. And mind you, what is key here is that they have a very robust framework that supports intellectual property development in India, which to a very large extent is extended globally to other areas of the world.
Now, what sort of mindset do you think underscores this type of development? Is it a solution-driven mindset?
Essentially it is, and when you use the word intentional, that is very key to development when you stay focused on a particular area where you might talk about what you call factor endowment or comparative advantage. So India is relying on the comparative advantage of intellectual property because they are so skilled in information communication technology, which is a major driver, an enabler to development across the world. So that massive investment, that intention, that power of focus, and a growth mindset that has a gender development in India has made it to stay at the top when you talk about data and intellectual property.
Though it's called intangible investment, but I know that some tangible investment must have been made towards the growth of the intangible investment sector of India. Apart from the education sector, I'm talking about the formal education sector, schools, what other kinds of investment engender this type?
I think what is big for India in particular is a concentration on investment in terms of vocational studies and vocational skills center, where people who identify in terms of their IT skills put in incubators where those developments are enhanced over a period of time. And there's a massive investment in terms of what is given to that space for development. So beyond the core sector of education, there's investment to develop those hubs, like the Silicon valleys you have in India, where people learn those technical skills that has enabled data management and other intellectual property that we speak to as we progress the conversation.
I'm going to interrogate that aspect of the intellectual property again, because we find that what India is doing with intellectual property is quite different from what Africa is doing with intellectual property. Earlier, I mentioned that there is a lot of attention given to the entertainment industry, and that's, you find that it's quite burdened. But if we look at what India is doing, is this, and what Africa is doing, could it be said that when it comes to intangible investment, it's been left to the private sector, it's been left to individuals in Africa, as opposed to a country-centered investment and plan that we have in India?
I think the challenge for us in Africa is that we must be deliberate in the policy framework that we put there for our society. I think the lesson from India is that they've made a massive investment in terms of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Then most African countries are paying lip service in terms of the investment they make in this sector. Beyond the formal education, vocational study centers are very critical to the development of the intellectual property. You need support from both the public and the private sector to sustain the development in that sector. On the other hand, even though our level of STEM may not be as upbeat as that of India, but then even if we add the arts, music, folklore, and some other things that you mentioned earlier, if that's a factor endowment that we have as a country or as a continent, we need to make massive investment in those areas, because on the other hand, some of those art and culture are domiciled even intellectually. So how do we harness those potentials in Africa or in Nigeria in particular, so that we can equally export that, and exponentially over the years we can be talking the way people speak about India. Once we make massive investment, support the intellectual property in those areas, and see it as a gateway to development. But then, if we must copy India, then we must put the thinking cap of technology transfer, whether they are local technologies, whether they are technologies coming from India. And mind you, most of the IT skills that are consumed, even even in the private sector, particularly the financial service sector, comes from India. So those who interface with them must find a way to develop those skill sets and see how we can use that to better the society.
I'm sure that the rewards for such investment that India has made is not only in a plus or us talking about it here. What are some of the benefits that could accrue to India from this investment they've made in intangible assets?
Number one is foreign investment because they are exporting intellectual property to other part of the world. Therefore, because of those skill sets, money will come back home. Even if you're operating what we call a gig economy, where people work offshore from other part of the world, India will equally benefit from that area. So their services and their intellectual property is in the global space. Therefore, in terms of investment coming to the country, that would benefit India essentially because they have made so much investment in that sector, and that sector will continue to act as a multiplier effect in terms of economic growth and development.
Now, if we look at intangible investment, it's not limited to intellectual property. There is also human capital knowledge. There is also brand equity. But let's take a look at brand equity, reputation that companies have been able to build and grow. How can some companies in Africa build that? And what would be the benefit of that in the global landscape?
Okay, if you look at it from a marketing point of view, you're talking about brand equity, you're talking about reputation management. Like we mentioned earlier, there was an intention. Therefore, if you look at the interrelationship between the investment in terms of STEM, in terms of branding, in terms of reputation. So some of these companies over the years have built reputation in terms of the service offering that they give to other parts of the world. Therefore, people believe in India in terms of service delivery when it comes to these products and services that they offer in the IT space. In that regard, for their brand equity will continue to grow stronger. So if you want to bring that to Africa or to Nigeria in terms of ICT engineering, in terms of branding, and in terms of reputation management, then that ecosystem that supports investment first and foremost, then we must be deliberate, we must be intentional, then we must stay focused in terms of what we do. Then the issue of corruption to a very large extent must be minimized where people cut corner because of quick win. So if you look at the long-term benefits of those investments, you want to sustain a national brand equity just like India. You want to even sustain brand equity from the point of view of private sector, then a good reputation management in terms of how you're perceived in the marketplace. So once we're able to marry these three elements, as it were, then Africa as a continent, and Nigeria in particular, would be able to leapfrog whatever they want to do in terms of development, whether they're focusing on their fertile endowment of arts and artifacts, or we want to do some technology transfer, since we're already doing a massive investment in that space with India. To what extent can we incubate those knowledge for development?
Aside using or playing in the technology landscape, but for brand equity, how relevant is it when it comes to the global outsourcing market for any country, for any organization that have been able to build brand equity? How relevant is this for them in the outsourcing markets?
Essentially, it's about competitiveness and that dimension that you are endowed with certain skill set or certain product or services, what you are known for, or a comparative advantage, then you focus on the development of those products and services in a way that you can attract what you mentioned earlier, brand equity, in a sustainable manner that gives you a competitive edge or a competitive advantage in the market space. And I think what India has done over the years is a massive investment they made first and foremost in the foundation of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. On the other hand, creating a kind of incubator hubs, labs that sustain ICT skills over the years. And this has become a major brand equity or brand proposition for India as a country. And India has remained top when you look at some of those top 500 companies in the world. Over 80% of those companies are headed by India. And I think it's a deliberate policy. We must find a way to imitate. That's another way you can take knowledge, through imitation and technology transfer. Over the years, if we are focused in that direction, then we might be on the trajectory of how India has smart some other global countries that play in that space.
So India ranks 14th on the scale or on the list of countries with high intangible investment. Now, what are the challenges why you may think that some countries do not want to or do not pay much attention to intangible investment? Has it anything to do with the fact that it's quite challenging measuring the value of intangible investments?
No, I think initially, before the emergence of machine tools and artificial intelligence, the measurement or the metrics for measuring intellectual property may have had some challenges. But with emergence of artificial intelligence, some of these things can be measured. But then some countries may not have made so much massive investment in that sector. Therefore, I'm sure with this new report in terms of Indian success in this area, some other country would like to benchmark those things that made India to be known in terms of intangible asset or investment.
So where does that position India right now when we talk about powerful economies, major economies? Already, India is an emerging economy and is doing quite well. We also have the likes like the US and countries like US and China dominating that space. But now that India, aside developing infrastructurally and in other areas, it has also developed a lot in the areas of intangible investment. So when India is mentioned now, where does that put India among the committee of the big players?
In the literature, Indian is addressed as an emerging market, but if you look at the remarkable stride in recent years, whether we can still describe India as an emerging economy, I think when it talks about development in terms of infrastructure and other businesses, Indians are doing remarkably well. And I'm sure in the shortest time from now, there will be a country to be reckoned with in terms of other tangible assets. And when you talk about the growing influence of India, rather, in the international space, then you can see that India is working very hard to see how they can compete with the 5G countries in the globe in a way that you cannot undermine India when it comes to industrial development.
All right, not being able to undermine India means that India gets a say when it comes to some issues that perhaps they would have been overlooked before. And Africa has been clamoring for such recognition that Africa is not seen as a continent for just primary products, but is seen as a continent that is developing. We talked about how to grow the intangible investments, but India is not doing that alone. They're like on every side. As much as they're investing intangibly, they're also investing in tangible areas that can be seen to transform their economy and their country. What are the lessons for Africa in this?
Number one is that Africa is endowed with primary products, and over the years after independence, we've been exporting primary products. And I think the counsel here is to look inward to see how we can improve on the management, the exploration and the exploitation of these primary products within Nigeria. Number two, there must be a deliberate policy framework, a continental framework, beyond these political jamborees they do at the African Union. What kind of investment do we want to make in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? What are competitive advantage? What are global competitiveness? What are the benchmark? What country do we want to benchmark so that we can compete favorably in the international market place? Until the government and the people have a deliberate policy like what happened in India, the issue of development will continue to be a mirage in Africa. Therefore, government must make massive investment in the area of ICT. Even when you talk about arts and culture, what can we export? We have a lot of sustainable film industry in Africa. To what extent can we leverage on those things to leapfrog development in terms of how we want to play in the international arena, or till we have this deliberate policy and move away from this dependency theory that has enveloped Africa for a very long while, that we must be dependent on the global north for us to do well. We have what it takes, but then we need to recalibrate our thinking processes in line with our own challenges, with our own environment, with a view to staying above the curve in terms of products and service delivery.
You know, India has a very large population, and its population by far is more than Nigeria's population, but it has a young population too, like Nigeria. And today happens to be International Youth Day. We've talked about how the youth can play the role in national growth or national economic growth. We've also talked about the digital pathways that can lead to sustainable development. Now, one part of the reasons why India is at the 14th position when it comes to countries with high intangible investment is because of software and data development, also developing new financial products and domestic products. And we say in Nigeria, by Nigeria, with the youth population that Nigeria has, how can Nigeria take advantage of its youth population to become very productive, that the saying by Nigeria doesn't just become something you use to encourage people to be patriotic, but it's something that becomes a reality. Nigerians find a reason to buy Nigeria. It could be in software, it could be in other areas. How do we harness our youth population?
I think for me, we already have a youthful population that's very creative, very innovative. So what we need to do, how do we sustain that ecosystem that was sustained in India, that brought about software development, data mining, data engineering, and if you go a step further, engineering and mathematics, even coding. Some of those creative skills are here with us. But the enabling environment, in terms of the support, in terms of the patronage that you just mentioned, to what extent can we consume what is made in Nigeria, whether in terms of software development, in terms of data engineering or data management, coding, and all within the ICT ecosystem, even artificial intelligence, machine tools. How do we resource the youthful population in a way that even those who are in diaspora, you can even attract them to come back home to develop those skill sets that can leapfrog Nigeria in particular in terms of development. So the issue here is beyond the youthful population. The government must find a way to see how they are encouraged. They should patronize their products. Then the private sector, particularly the banking sector as well, once they see some of these skill sets, they should equally patronize them and reduce the outsourcing to India in terms of ICT and see how some youths in Nigeria can benefit. Once you're able to patronize them, there will be improvement in terms of their service delivery over a period of time.
Many thanks, Sam Orovwuje, who is a public affairs analyst and also a policy expert, for being on Early Exchange today.
My pleasure, Blessing. Thank you.
All right, it is good for us to say buy Nigeria, but we should have many of the products from which you can say, yes, we want to buy this one. Organizations can say they want to buy that. I like to take it from where you left. Some of the outsourcing to India, maybe some other countries, may not be necessary when Nigeria and Africa develops its own. It might just even be cheaper at the end of the day. That's the show for this Monday. Thank you for watching. I am Blessing AJ. Follow us on our social media platforms at Certain News TV on Facebook, Instagram, on X. Leave a comment. The conversation continues now with you. Share your thoughts, and you can be part of the show again tomorrow. It begins 8 a.m. West African time. Enjoy your day. Market Insight comes up at 11 a.m. here at Certain News TV.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.